Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Katrina Fenlon. I'm an assistant professor here in the College of Information Studies and a member of CAFE. And I am very proud to be mentoring my postdoc, Jwan Khisro, who will be presenting to us today. Before we get started, I'll read our land acknowledgement. Today, we're beaming in from College Park, Maryland, which is located on the ancestral territories of the Piscataway, Nacotchtank, and their indigenous kin and neighbors. As members of the University of Maryland, we acknowledge, as a land-grant university, the 202,000 acres of stolen indigenous land taken and distributed to the university under the Morrill Act in 1862. We want to acknowledge the separation that these and many other acts of colonialism, assimilation, and genocide, which include archival collecting, generate between indigenous peoples and their homelands. We honor the continued power and resilience of indigenous communities and nations and celebrate the collaborative and decolonizing work now taking place in our collections and institutions. We further acknowledge the University of Maryland's connections to slavery and to generations of racialized trauma rooted in the institution. As a member college of the University studying slavery, the University of Maryland has undertaken the 1856 project committed to investigating and illuminating these histories. The 1856 project endeavors to lay a path toward restorative history, allowing for the institution to engage in the work of moral accountability and reconciliation. Through this work, the University of Maryland recommits itself to creating equitable, inclusive, and diverse curricula and spaces. Okay, now I will introduce Jwan. So the context for Jwan's postdoc is that for several years, the College of Information Studies has had a partnership with the National Agricultural Library, which is just up the road in Beltsville, to do research and to run student internships related to digital curation. We've had many successful student projects over the years, and many years ago, we also had some really exciting postdoctoral researchers with projects, but it has been since well before the pandemic that we have been able to host a postdoc on this project. So I am so thrilled that we finally have the opportunity to have a postdoc, and especially one of the caliber of Jwan. Jwan's been with us since August of last year, and she's in a 2-year postdoc fellowship with us. So Jwan earned her PhD in informatics at the Department of Applied IT at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden in 2022. She also earned a licentiate degree in informatics at the Department of Information Systems and Technology at Mid-Sweden University in 2019, following a master's degree in informatics at the University of Gothenburg in 2013. Her research focuses on multidisciplinary fields, studying the constraints of digital transformation in the public sector from different perspectives like IT governance, investment budget, and digital infrastructure. Jwan's work has appeared in academic journals such as the Enterprise Information Systems Journal and Transforming Government, People, Process, and Policy, and she regularly presents her work at top conferences in information systems, including AMCIS, eGov, and HICS. That's actually the end of Jwan's illustrious bio, so at this point, I'll hand it off. Thank you so much for your time today, Jwan.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, online and on-site. I'm so delighted to have you here and have this opportunity to share my current research insights and findings. And I know how everyone's schedule is too busy, so I truly appreciate you giving priority to my talk and presentation. So just Katrina mentioned that as a postdoctoral researcher, my position is intersection between NAL, National Agricultural Library, and USDA, with like our school, iSchool at UMD. And this study is divided into 2 phases. The first phase, which is still pretty much under like process, focusing on insights from policymakers at US federal agencies that funding research projects and scientific research. And the second phase, I will go down in the hierarchy to operational level. So both phases in my study is responding to the Office of Science and Technology Policy, OSTP, that released a memo on August 2022. And in this memo, providing guidance for updating for the federal funding agencies to update their policy making for public access to research results. And in this memo, Nelson memo, equity has been mentioned as a key priority. So I am also affiliated with TRIALS, Trustworthy of AI in Law and Society. And this is a partnership between UMD, GW, and Morgan State University, which is funded by NSF. So, but before I begin in my presentation, I would like to tell you an incident happened with me. So, which can make you like think about the duality of our scientific or academic community, which is like not too long ago, I stumbled upon a great study article that talking about discussing the equity perspective within open science. So when I read the abstract, I feel like this is a star, like shining star of knowledge. Naturally, I got excited to read it, right? So what I did, I clicked on download like faster than you could say peer review. So what happened? Can you guess what happened? It appeared that I have to pay $45 to download this paper. So here I became a decision or a crossroad decision. Do I or should I cancel going out this night with my friends and pay to read this paper, or skip reading this paper and go out and have fun with my friends? I will not tell you what I decided. But student knowledge, especially those that promoting accessibility, openness, equity, be totally free, available, and accessible to everyone who seek it, right? Therefore, this study is so important. So yeah, by the way, I speak English, Swedish, and Arabic. So this is just a heads up if you feel like I sound like I'm talking Swinglish. So this is our agenda today. I'll go through my research journey shortly, like just Katrina mentioned, talked about my research journey, but I'll go through briefly. And what is my study anatomy and the area of concern, where's the problem, what is the problem, and what kind of research approach I utilize in this study, and the analytical framework I use, what do we have as a preliminary result, and what is the next step? What's my next steps? So, but before I go further in my talk, I would like to tell you like so briefly how I got interested in information studies and like in general, and especially particularly in digital government. So it was like a growing concern over the years when I, like in my interest in nature, when I began notice how everything in our universe in a very delicate and accurate balance without any documentation, regulation, governance, and even no human intervention. So later then, my interest in soft system methodology for Peter Checkland, 1999, enriched the idea of the active nature of planning processes and practices, includes some concepts such as iteration, continuous learning, that enriched together these like developed into my current interest in digital government, especially how different kind of activities and tensions that contradict each other in its nature, but at the same time needs to be in a delicate and accurate balance and continuously. So yeah, this is, and I can happily talk more about my interest and how I got interested in digital government. Yeah. So here is my research journey. I'll go through it so fast. My interest in research started when I finished my master thesis, when I felt like what I did, what I investigated, didn't satisfy my curiosity. So I wanted to know more. So my first position was adjunct at University of Gothenburg, Applied Information Technology. And in this position, they didn't include any kind of research or budget for research. So I decided to do research by my own. Why I did that? Because I truly believe that research and teaching go hand in hand, both sides for the same coin, let's say, because when I do research, I want to spread the knowledge I created, otherwise why I did it. And when I teach, I want evidence from my current research, my updated research to my students to our field, the beauty of our field is it is interdisciplinary. But the hard side is that we are teaching untouchable concepts. So we need evidence, we need examples from our real life, from our research to show our students how does it work. So therefore, I did research by my own in this position as an adjunct. Then I joined iServe project at Mid Sweden University, where I earned licentiate degree. In Sweden, you can earn half PhD. So this was a half PhD where I studied multi-relation collaboration from enterprise architecture, enterprise interoperability perspective within Scandinavian electricity market. And then my licentiate research project has nothing to do with my PhD research project. But as you know, PhD journey is never a straightforward journey. There's always snowballing here, convenience choices there. So this journey helped me grow and understand what does it mean to create and spread knowledge at the same time. So then I went back to University of Gothenburg, where I studied digital transformation within public sector. And I found 3 constraints mechanisms that constrains digital transformation. Namely, sluggishness in IT governance, reactivity in funding model, and misallocation of resources in digital transformation. And then I'm here now at the postdoctoral. So, this study anatomy serves as a backdrop to my study. So I used to start for any research I do with this study anatomy. So for me, if I successfully fill all of these subtitles, let's say, or boxes, for me, that's mean I'm good to go. I know what I'm doing. So regarding the area of concern, so this study, it's about while making scientific research results publicly available has given a considerable effort, equity remains a significant challenge. And the knowledge gap lays in the unexplored area of what does it mean or truly mean with equity in the context of public access to research results. So yeah, the theoretical framing here, I utilized or tied together the equity perspective with open science, public access, open access. I will come back to this one in coming slides. And let's just read the research question together. How can equity in public access to scientific research results be increased? This is my research question, and I utilize clinical inquiry approach coupled with interpretation method. The contribution of this study is that to deepen our understanding of what does it mean to have equitable access to scientific research results, and it benefiting librarian, researchers, funding agencies, and public at large. So please don't count after me how many times I say So what is the problem? So here we have the area of concern and the knowledge gap. As just mentioned, equitable, the public access to research results and having it publicly available has been given a considerable effort. But what do we mean by, before we go further to equity perspective, we need to know what do we mean by public access? What is public access? Do we all know the differences between open science, public access, open access? Do we truly differentiate between them? For me, it was totally big no before this study. So then I discovered theory differentiate between these 3 concepts, but in practical, stakeholders don't see these differences. So here we need to know more about open science. What is open science? Open science is simply the principles and practices for to making all the research content publicly freely available to everyone. Just as an example, scientific research, data set, software, educational resources, open peer review process, everything regarding open research content, sorry. So then we have the other concept is public access. What does it mean? It's mainly focusing on having the research results in scientific publication and the data sets publicly available to everyone without any restriction, without any paywall or subscription charges. And it's mainly focusing on or built on the idea of the research is funded by taxpayer. So citizens are investing and paying for research by their taxes or through their taxes. Then we have the third concept is the open access. And in open access, they mean or the literature define it as let's say, the model of having the manuscript, mainly the manuscript, not the research content, the manuscript as, for example, publication from journals and conference papers, publicly available, freely available to everyone. But in this model, they are shifting the payment mechanism or the cost from the citizen, from people, to the author, to institutions. But here a direct question is, then the author is also citizen? Aren't they paying twice if they are paying for open access? So for me, is that regardless, what we are talking about, open science, public access, open access, so how do we know it is equitable? What does it mean to have equitable access? So what do we have here then? Because if we say we have publicly available data, publicly available research content, publicly available scientific research, it doesn't mean it is equitable or there's equity in this public access to research results. So the issue, let me say, with the concept equity is about that the equity in itself is a fuzzy concept. So it needs to be studied, it needs to be understood in relation, ties to the context. Otherwise, it's difficult to define it in itself. So, for example, equity within healthcare means something totally different than equity within education or equity within transportation. And what does it mean, equity in public access to research results? So when I try to deepen my understanding about what does it mean about equity, I just realized, what kind of equity do we mean by equitable access? So there are many different types of equitable access. Do we mean urban versus rural? Do we mean language? Do we mean disability? Do we mean ethnicity? Do we mean gender? What kind of, how many types of equity? And when we have these many different types or kinds of equity, how can we evaluate it? How can we say that inequity has been reduced? If we have this much, a lot of many types of equity perspective. So, yeah, to understand that, I utilize this framework, analysis framework that covers, this framework is inspired from Magula's 2012, and it covers 4 different dimensions or aspects. And this is I utilize as a also backdrop in my interviews with different stakeholders. I mean the policymaker stakeholders, And in structural aspect or dimension, here we discussed how they ensure equity within public access to research results and what kind of policy changes has been effective in increase and evaluate public access, equity in public access to research results. Then the other dimension, we discussed the functional aspects or dimensions. So here we discussed the implementation process of these policies and what kind of activities that hinder equity within public access to research results. Then the knowledge aspects focused on, we discussed what does the notion of equity in itself mean to them and in relation to public access to research results, and what is their understanding of the public access in itself also, and what kind of support do they have to increase public access. And by support, I mean any kind of like framework, resource, model, method, tool, any kind of support to increase the public access. Then the last one is the socio-cultural aspect. There we discussed how can we evaluate the equity perspective, equity or equitable public access to research results, or if I want to put it from the other side, how can we know that inequity has been reduced? And what type? Like, is it when we say inequity has been reduced, do we mean the ethnicity equity, gender equity, urban versus rural equity? So here we have like many different type or kinds of concerns regarding how can we know that it is decreased. So this is my lovely part. I love it. So the research approach I utilize in this study is a clinical inquiry approach with an interpretation method. Do you know about it? Do you hear about it? Clinical inquiry approach? No. So it's quite similar to action research. You know action research, I guess. So it's quite similar to action research in studying and focusing the results from theory-based interventions in organization, in a specific organization. But it differs, this is as simply as that, it differs in prioritizing practical outcome as a like main and primary goal in this study. So what the reason behind this choice for me are like, it has three characteristics that made me choose this approach is that first is the clinician, the researcher, starts with the mindset to understand, to enter the organization and understand specific community or group of people as a human agency. The second reason, it is oriented toward pathology and problem area that needs a remedial action. The third reason, that the clinician or the researcher engage in the organization under study as an active part to solve a particular problem that is often requested by the organization, and this particular practical solution established or come from the research insights in itself. So yeah, as I said before, this study is divided into two phases, right? So the first phase is divided into two steps then. So the first steps is the pre-study. And this pre-study, we analyzed a 2 listening session with USDA listening session with their stakeholders. It gave us a written comment on how they see, what kind of questions they have about equity perspective within public access, and analyzing the action research, action plans from federal agencies that have funded scientific research. And in this kind of action plan, like we are looking together, me and Katrina, looking at how these reports, how deeply these reports mentioning equity and how they look at it and like how they grasp it, talk about it, interpret it. So, and this one, I'm going to present it in Open Repository International Conference in Sweden in June. So the second step in the first phase is that I conducted, already done with 20 interviews, but I have just one interviewee didn't like sign the consent form, so officially I have 19. City structure interviewed with policymaker from different US federal agencies that funding scientific research. For example, NASA, Department of Energy, USDA, NIH, NSF, and more. So, and I decided the analysis is truly still like in a very, what does it call, like in very initial steps, but I decided to analyze it based on Brown and Clark's thematic analysis. And these thematic analysis, like so briefly, is that it includes 6 steps. First, familiarizing with the data, like read to deepen my like knowledge and understanding of the whole material. Then initiate very initial codes that like highlighting the concepts, words, phrases that reflecting the problem area. And then 3 steps regarding the themes. The third one is that like searching for themes, trying to tie together different kind of codes to like searching for the themes, then naming them to reflect what we have as a problem area and the research question. Then the last one is that to review, or not the last one, before last one is that review the themes I created to just like to be sure that it's reflecting what we like looking to solve in this study. And then the last one is that like reporting the whole, the all themes found and formulated in a interpretation style. So here is like this study is still pretty much under process, but this like here is the primary result. And as I mentioned before, like some interviewees talking about equity as ethnicities, gender, race. Others talk about as like it's about language, disability, equity, and so on. So, and on the other side, as this quotation, like they are trying or saying that open science, they are using open science as synonym to public access, to open access. So we need here to have like a clarification between these 3 concepts I talked about like earlier, open access, public access, open science, because it depends and it affects our like how do we update the policies. Then the other like the third quotation that it is complicated, and if anyone, author, institution, anyone pay for open access, it means this citizen paying double. So this person is paying twice for having their research open access, for having publicly available data or scientific research. So, yeah. So here, when we discuss this kind of like what kind of barriers we have to increase equitable access to research results. So the paywall, the pay to public access is one of hindering activities, and the lack of support to small institutions. So when it's like the funding goes to big institutions and then to like big project research, then what about the equity here? Okay. Before yesterday, I decided to, after the slide, go to my next step research, next steps. But my daughter, 12 years daughter, came to me just last night at 10 o'clock and she asked me, she's so good in installing the sleep from my eyes. So she did it so successfully last time or last day. So she asked me, Mom, I saw your poster online and because I like reposted in my social media. So she told me, I saw your poster, it's so nice. But can't you have any other picture than your beautiful face that's interpreting the title of your work or your like research that I couldn't understand any single word of it. No sleep. Then I will show you what I made as a figure. She is like 12 years old, so she said picture. In our field we call it figure, right? So I mean, I couldn't sleep before I do anything that reflects the current process of the public access to research results. So please don't take it too serious. This is 2 a.m. figure. So here, what do we have? The process starts from the Office of Science and Technology Policy and goes to the federal funding agencies, and this happened through the government agencies, policies. The OSTP, especially in the latest memo, they providing policies and guidelines to update, to let the federal agencies update their policies. And then what federal funding agencies do is making prioritizing the research area they are going to fund, right? And then this funding goes to research projects and different kind of, institutions, universities, research centers, whatever, they are prioritizing. They are going to fund, for example, digital infrastructure, ideas, AI within XYZ, so they are prioritizing. What happened then? The research projects have the research results. The research projects producing this kind of scientific research, right? Doing research, publishing in different platforms, in different journals, conferences, posters. So then the research results be publicly available. Then, the publicly available research has an impact on the OSTP again to update their policies or guidelines about the policies to go back. This is the second loop to the funding model and federal funding agencies. And what I see is that the equity is occur in this circles or green circles, if you see it green. In government policies, in research priorities, research results, and the impact. So the equity remains in this kind of, in this mechanism. So I want to, I would love to discuss this figure more. I don't know if you have any idea to take it more seriously. So anyway, as I said, this is 2 a.m. figure. Well, what is my next steps? My next step after this phase, the first phase is the second phase, right? So as I mentioned, go down in the hierarchy to the operational level and to study the same equity perspective with public access to research results with librarian, user of publicly available articles, and different researchers that have been funded from USDA. And I'm also interested, and I'm currently writing this a proposal to TRIALS application, which is going soon, or I will hand it soon, April 22. And as long-term step, I see myself as a faculty member here at high school. Before I heard about the idea about the chemistry between people, right? But now I living the chemistry between people, person, and the institution as a whole. So this is the references I used in this presentation, in my talk, and question, please. I'm done. Thank you.
So again, for those in the chat, please, in the Zoom room, please feel free to share your questions in the chat and we can ask them out in the room. And I can also start questions in the room if we have any, and if not, I'll take the impromptu chair's prerogative. Go ahead, Sam.
Right, thank you so much for the talk. I was wondering about, I used to work in publishing, and I remember at the time, there was a lot of discussion about like green open access models where like publishers have figured out how to still make money off of open access publishing with like putting the costs on authors. And there's this discussion about having requirements for federal grants, basically like require that they like release those publications. Is that something that came up in your interviews, or what is like the state of that model for providing access to public research?
Okay, this is exactly what you are mentioning, is that in the area of misinterpretation of these kind of public access, open science. So the green model and the golden one also is within the open access. What I'm focused, I'm not saying this is a bad model, but I mean, what I'm focusing on is that the public access to research results that is funded by people, that is funded by the taxpayer. So it should be totally, freely, equitably accessible to everyone because everyone paid for it. So actually my focus is in this area, that I'm looking for funding, federal funding agencies that's funding scientific research, right? So how can we have this equitable access? Because it should be equitable access to research results because it's based on the taxpayer, as simple as that. So I know what you are talking about, and this is a part of the open access, which is again part of the story. It's not the whole story, and the green access or the green model and the golden model is somehow out of the public access beliefs. Yeah.
So question I have sort of related. When you, and we do have a question in the chat in a moment, which I'll get to, but in your interview studies, were you finding policy makers, program officers, others talking about alternatives that they have seen either in other parts of the world or things that they have not yet seen that they hope might become possible, that differ from the models that are already out there in terms of sharing research and data?
Do you mean if they have any kind of idea about out of there? I'm not getting exactly what you mean.
So the question is, it sounds like there are critiques and concerns about the current available models for making publicly funded research available. In your discussions, did you find anybody saying like, here's a great idea that we don't do yet? And if yes, what were some of those alternatives?
Okay, I get what you mean. The concern is not within the public access in itself. Their concern, all my interviewees' concern, is how to increase, how to ensure the equitable access in this public access research results. So they are, the short answer to your question is no, but for more clarification is that they are all wondering about how can they evaluate it, because it's not something that like tangible or like it's difficult to like evaluate equity within public access. We can't say it is publicly available, accessible. But when it's accessible, it doesn't mean it's equitable. You see what I mean? So the short answer or the direct answer to your question, no, they don't have, like, no one mentioned a specific solution or a kind of model that can solve this kind of, and I don't think only, that's why I divided this study into two phases, because first, I didn't divide it to two pieces. I thought to do it one shot. But I feel like, no, it needs to be like deeply understood in different phases with different stakeholders from the top level in the hierarchy, then go down to the operational level, like librarian, researcher, and so on. So I hope I answered.
Yeah, and so we've got a couple of questions in the chat, which I'll just read out. So Jason Barron says, I have a question whether this GAO report has been incorporated into your research. I think that maybe is as much sharing a source that may be useful. So maybe that's something you can look at. And then Vanak, somebody has asked, sorry, Vanak 10 has asked, you said that you were Swedish. How do our current systems in the US differ between the two countries? Slash the EU, I guess, as well.
Okay. This is a good question, and this is like in an indirect way, an answer to why I decided to expand my knowledge on the other side of the earth. So, like, I mean, from Scandinavian academic school, I early in my research journey, I decided to move after my PhD to US to expand my knowledge in different levels. And back to the question is that I worked in all of, like, the whole journey I did in Sweden. I worked with public sector, government agencies, and this is my passion, is that, like, how did, like, digital government from this different kind of perspective and different kind of implication of technologies used in digital government. And the question to this question is differs a lot, and there's similarities in many ways. Like, I mean, the bureaucracy, the digital heritage, the sluggishness in the process. Here we have very common between European and US school. I mean, like in if I would say the public sector or digital government, or from different perspectives. What is the difference here is that the funding mechanism within academia, especially in Scandinavian, is totally different than here in US. And this is like got me a while to understand what does it mean to come into academia in US than in, like, what does it mean to be in academia in, like, European. And I tried to find people that, like, have this duality in their CVs and so to discuss with them. I mean, now I'm going to another area, but I mean, if I want to talk only about the academia in publishing process, in public access to research results, the funding mechanism is totally different. So we cannot compare it in this easy, simple way. We can do a total, like a whole research study about, like, comparing these two kind of schools or different kind of funding model, and what is the advantage and disadvantage in both.
Vanak has a follow-up question, and then we're gonna have a question from Jason. Do you think that a lot of the differences are due to societal priorities? You touched on a lot about the differences between academia in the two places. So societal priorities, I guess, is the center of that question.
Yeah, but I think I'm limiting a lot if I say just this aspect. So there are many different aspects that affect and affects in this area between this kind of the differences between European or Scandinavian, let me say, and the US. Actually, I don't see a simple, direct answer to this question, but as I said, the whole mechanism of the funding, not only in the academia, not only in publishing articles, not only in the process of like recruiting, having the like academic people, academic schools, it's in every single detail. It's like it's a puzzle, a whole puzzle stuff. So it's not only one piece that is fixing or doing or differentiate between these two schools. It's too like there are a lot of heritage here, I see. This is a very deep, old, different schools with this similarity of the bureaucracy, big amount of digital heritage. So it's a complex. I think we need to sit down and discuss this point. Right? So
Sounds good. And then, Jason, did you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, this is a very interesting talk and raising really important issues. Let me ask, have you talked to people at GAO about what their recommendations are in this area? They issued a 2019 report to audit the government as how it responded to a Obama administration OSTP memorandum in 2013, and they found deficiencies in many agencies in terms of web access. They didn't however, GAO is not reviewing the equity issue in the sophisticated way that you are. So the question is, how much interaction have you had with GAO or with others that may have responded to the GAO recommendations in this area? Have you had fruitful conversations, or does that remain to be done?
before I answer, and can you please tell me what is the acronym of GAO? This is one different, by the way. Here in US, you love acronyms.
Yeah.
Which for me is too confusing because in Sweden they used to write the whole sentence every time, every single email. So please, to be sure we are on the same page, can you please tell me what do you mean by GAO?
It's the Government Accountability Office. It's the auditing office. It's part of the legislative branch. And what it does is it audits government compliance with policies and legislation that's been passed. So if you're not familiar with the report that I cited, I suggest that you take a look at it. It's a very rich look at access to research. There have been tremendous successes in the area with millions of documents put up in NIH and others, but there are deficiencies that are noted. But interestingly, and I'm happy to follow up with you offline, but interestingly, the ways that the report that I looked at during your talk reviews issues is less sophisticated than the model that you're suggesting with respect to different aspects or facets to equity. And so I think what you're doing is fascinating, but I do think that there's a tremendous amount of effort that has been done by GAO and by others responding to it. And so you should tap into that as a resource.
I know what you are talking about, and I truly appreciate this suggestion. I'll take a look at it. And what, according to your like earlier question, is that I mostly look at the memo from, I don't know, does he see me or no? No. Anyway, do you hear me well?
Oh, Jason actually looks frozen. Are we frozen?
No, his eyes blinked. Jason, are you with us?
Oh, I'm sorry. So what's the question?
I have no question. Do you hear me well?
Yeah,
mean-
no. Right. Let's follow up after the talk.
Okay, yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
I think answer anyway, and then
Okay,
and then we'll.
okay. In this phase, in my current research, I focused and I deepened myself in these two memo, like 2013, the Herder memo and the Nelson memo, and the differences between them. And I know like there are many different serious efforts have been made in this kind of public access to research results, and the main update, let's say, in this memo from 2013 to 2022 is that it is like currently before latest memo, the 2013, they have the embargo for 12 months after the research publication or publishing. Now they are asking to update the federal agencies to update their policies to have the public access to research results immediately and equitably. And like, yeah, so I don't know if am I answering this question or?
I think partly, so, yeah, I think Jason sounded like.
But
he
I would
wanted
love to
have
discuss
further
with him
conversation
deeper, yeah, sure.
As well, maybe we can put your email in the chat if
Sure.
anybody wants to reach
Sure.
out, I can do that now.
Sure.
And unless we have another question in the room, I'll say, let's give Jwan a big warm round of applause. And for those in the room, we have some treats. Sorry for those on the Zoom. All right, thank you all so much.